We are tier ranking the top 30 pro wrestling themed podcasts or YouTube channels or pro wrestler hosted podcasts or YouTube channels, according to this guy right here. Come on in. What's up, y'all? It's your boy Seth Grimes here today with a little piece of bonus content for you. Today we're going to be doing a tier ranking of 30 of the top pro wrestling themed or hosted podcasts or YouTube channels. This is a video that I did before back in 2022, so almost 2 years ago, and the landscape has completely changed. Some of those podcasts are no longer with us. They are gone, so this needed an update. It needed a refresh. Plus, look, as I said, the landscape has changed. Podcasts have kind of morphed into YouTube channels as well, right? Or YouTube videos. Every single podcaster, or at least all the big ones, have a video form available on YouTube. So it seems unfair to rule out YouTubers who do wrestling interviews. So we're going to include them in for the first time. Now, this is just my opinions. I plucked 30 of what I felt would be 30 of the top podcasts or YouTube channels. If I forgot your favorite, don't hold it against me. I did not bring in any kind of fan hosted, or at least I don't think I did. It's possible that there's one on there, but no, there isn't, as I'm looking at this now. Fan hosted like what I'm doing, right? Even if it's somebody significantly bigger like Solo Monster or JD from New NY or whatever the fuck, like those people are not going to appear on this tier ranking podcast. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive on in. But before we do, if I could bug you to please hit that subscribe button down below. If at any point you're watching, you enjoy what you're watching, hit the like too, leave a comment. It's all good. I want to hear your thoughts as well. Tell me where you disagree with me. That could be a fun conversation. But let's go ahead and dive on into my thoughts. We're going to tier rank these bitches. All right, we are here over at our tier maker list. And before we get into the rankings, let's take a look at our list and kind of go over the categories here and what we're working with. At the bottom, we have drizzling shits. This means that this podcast to me is personally the drizzling shits. It sucks. I hate it. I never want to listen to it. That is subjective. This is just my list. It doesn't mean that it's your drizzling shits or that the podcast itself is the drizzling shits. It just means that it's my drizzling shits. And enough about my bowel movements. Moving on up to the next category, good hand. These are just okay. They are podcasts that I will probably never listen to, but every once in a while they might have a good guest on that's worth a listen. For example, there was a podcast, definitely not on the list this year, but last time I did it, Vicky Guerrero's Excuse Me podcast, right? Completely ignorable, completely missable, but hey, every once in a while she had somebody on that was worth listening to. Moving on up to mid. These guys are not good, they're not bad, they're just kind of there. This is a serviceable podcast. If you are bored, if you're on a road trip and you've gotten through all the heavy hitters, you want to see what else is out there are a lot of mid-tier, or possibly a lot, we'll see what happens here, mid-tier podcasts to get through. They don't suck, they're not bad, they have decent stuff from time to time, but they're missable about half the time too. It depends who's on, what are they talking about, what kind of mood you're in. Top guys, these are going to be podcasts that you're going to want to listen to almost always. These are often news-making podcasts, often interesting, often have interesting guests. Maybe it's skippable from time to time, but for the most part, these are the ones you're going to want to hit during the week. Then we have the main event. These are the staples. These are the people that are running the wrestling podcast. These are the top of the line main eventers. Oh my God, they dropped a new episode. I have to go listen and see what they have to say. I never miss this person's podcast. Now that we have that under the way, let's go through and check out who we have, who we're working with. 6 Feet Under, The Undertaker. We'll talk about these in depth as we rank them, so we're just going to name them here. Undertaker, 6 Feet Under. 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. The Jim Cornette Experience. Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. The Gorilla Position, a new one, a YouTube specific. There, Grillin' JR, AEW Unrestricted, Corny's Drive-Thru. We'll probably rank those together. We'll see. Fightful, Insight, Busted Open, Major Wrestling Figures Podcast. Maven made the list because he's a YouTuber. Wrestling host, a YouTuber. MMA Hour. It's an MMA show, but they have wrestlers. The CM Punk interview was on there. Come on. Keeping It 100, Swerve City. Click This. Hall of Fame with Booker T. Talk is Jericho. My World with Jeff Jarrett. Not Sam Wrestling, Something to Wrestle, Impulsive, wrestler hosted, has wrestlers on, Dutch Mantel, the Stevie Richards YouTube channel, Kurt Angle Show, Inside the Ropes, Vince Russo's The Brand, the Wrestling Observer Radio, and One of a Kind with RVD. Now, I wanted to do an even 30. I couldn't include everybody. If I missed your favorite, please let me know them down in the comments if they're not like fan hosted or anything like that. I know Sandman's got a podcast that's been off and popping that I got to check out. But what others might I have missed? Before we get into this, I do want to include your thoughts. I don't want you to just turn this off because your favorite wasn't in here. Tell me why. Tell me who. Tell me what I missed. Otherwise, let's go ahead and dive on in. First off, RVD's One of a Kind podcast. One of a Kind. We're going to go ahead and throw here in good hand. This doesn't really do any kind of interviews. It's just RVD talking with Dominic something. Is that his name? I forgot his name already. The only real thing of note about this podcast is every once in a while RVD has pretty profound opinions and good takes on things, and he smokes weed on camera because that's fun, right? Everybody loves a guy who smokes weed on camera. That's really cool. But RVD's One of a Kind podcast. I mean, it's definitely something that you can listen to from time to time, especially if you see like an interesting clip. But other than that, it's just kind of, it's a good hand. Next up, the Major Wrestling Figures podcast. I'm going to go ahead and slide that one into good hand as well. This one hosted by Matt Cardona, Zack Ryder himself, Brian Myers, and Smart Mark Sterling. I put it here because this podcast doesn't suck. It's not the drizzling shits. In fact, it's quality enough to be higher on the tier list, but because it's so damn niche that you really got to be kind of locked into the collectible market, the wrestling figures. You know, it's not just your standard shoot the shit wrestling podcast. You know, it's very locked in and niche. So for there, it's a good hand. It's good to listen to if that's your thing. My World, Jeff Jarrett's podcast with Conrad Thompson. I'm going to drop that one into the drizzling shits. Longtime listeners of myself will know that I have a no Jeff Jarrett rule policy. This came about because I started listening to his podcast because of this show, or because of my pro wrestling podcast where I cover wrestling podcasts. And I wasn't too impressed with it. It kind of bored me to tears, to be quite frank, for the most part. And there were times where Jeff Jarrett's personality just rubbed me the wrong way. And this popped off, especially when there was that incident where he berated the production guy, or the guy who writes the fucking, comes up with the timeline of shit or the facts or whatever that they go through on the show, and really just buried him and kind of buried Conrad a little bit and really had a bitch fit on camera. And ever since then, I swore off Jeff Jarrett. Now I have popped in from time to time, I'm not going to lie, but very, very, very rarely. And I don't really do videos on him. And look, it's just kind of my gimmick. I don't know that I really actually have any beefs with Jeff Jarrett. It's just kind of fuck Jeff Jarrett, you know, put it on a t-shirt, have a little fun with it. But no, I don't listen to it. I mean, the podcast still sucks. AEW Unrestricted. I'm going to go ahead and put this here at good hand as well. This would have been more mid for me probably last time I did this, or possibly even higher. But Tony Schiavone doesn't host the show anymore. Will Washington stepped in to do it. Though Will is great, he is no Tony Schiavone. Tony Schiavone, he is not. And so it was a step down based on that. And also Unrestricted just interviews AEW wrestlers. And sure, it's fun when they got Will Ospreay on or Adam Copeland, even though when they do have stars like Adam Copeland or Will Ospreay, they ask the same goddamn stupid questions that everybody else asks. They ask very stupid, lame, surface level, generic questions. Then they do fan like Twitter questions, which are even more stupid, lame, and surface level. It's a really shitty podcast format, to be honest with you. And like, so even when you get Adam Copeland on there, he's saying the same shit he said in 30 different interviews. It's boring. Nothing's really all that interesting. Oh, why'd you come to AEW? What made you leave WWE? Who cares? Who cares? Then, even worse than that, when they have like Emi Sakura on, like fucking, I think RJ City just had on Hey EW. Really, who cares? You know what I mean? You're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel there. They're lucky they're not in the drizzling shits on that rant. Jesus Christ. But they're a good hand. Every once in a while they got one you can listen to, which is, God, it's a step down from where they used to be. Sounds like the company itself, doesn't it? Gorilla Position, the newcomer here to this list, as we're including YouTubers from the last time I did this. They might have a podcast. I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know that much about them, but I know that they, around WrestleMania season, I've seen them beforehand, but certainly around WrestleMania, they were putting out some great interviews with, I mean, good interviews, like good questions, good deep, like the guy, they know what they're doing over there. I'm going to put this... Whew. Shit. That's why I don't know if it's fair to put them at mid. I don't know that they're must listen though. But they do a good job. They have a lot of heavy hitters. Let's go ahead and I'm going to put them in the top guys actually. Well, no, let's change it. Let's put them in mid. God, they're like right on that. If there was like a notch right there, like you know, like if a top guy gets injured or something, you might be able to slide Gorilla Position in for. I mean, the dude's a good interviewer on there. Like, but yeah, can't say like it's a must listen for me. It's just me. It's just me. Insight with Chris Van Vliet. This has worked its way up to being a main event podcast. Chris Van Vliet, though, still my main criticism about him is that he's not. His questions are kind of surface level as well, but he at least asks interesting questions. Like he doesn't really get into the deep shit or the hard questions necessarily, but he does ask, and he asks a lot of like generic questions that everybody asks. But, you know, like he recently did an interview with Goldust, and it's like, oh, you know, the Goldust character and the Savio Vega story where you feel me. Like, we've heard all this shit before, and him as a host, he should know that, which should almost denote him to top guys, but because he always gets stars on there, and because he's just probably the very best at what he does, even though what he does isn't necessarily my style of interviewing or journalism or whatever you want to call it. He's like got that like I want to say like that TV celebrity style of interviewing where it just he's the best he's the best at what he does for the wrestling. Bottom line, he's a main event podcaster. The Kurt Angle Show. This is a fun little podcast every once in a great while. So I'm going to throw it into good hand. More often or not, you know, they follow like the format where they'll talk about something in Kurt Angle's past. And what's it? Paul Bromwell, is that the guy's name that hosts it with him? He does a good job. But they do get really fascinating interviews on, or at least people on. I don't think Kurt's all that great of an interviewer, but he's a good conversationalist, at least. It's a good hand. It's a good hand podcast. Bro, we got to do Vince Russo's The Brand, bro. It's a wrestling podcast. This one I'm going to throw in good hand as well. That category's stacking up quick. Holy shit. Vince Russo, I mean, the pod doesn't suck, but it is kind of bottom barrel. It's very negative. It's very, look what Tony Khan's doing, bro. Or whatever. You know, it's like, it's a burial show. They pick apart and bury the product on there. Gets a bunch of grumpy complainers on. He'll have Al Snow on, and Al will just complain and bury shit. Like Russo, EC3 as well, he has on there often doing the same thing. It's a negative show, and it makes it hard to listen to a lot of times, but every once in a while Russo will pop through with a good clip or something that's a fun take to listen to, at least, or at least a different opinion on something. And I find myself popping in to listen to Russo more often than I would think I would. But I wouldn't, put him anywhere near you. I wouldn't even say he's mid, but he's definitely not the drizzling shits. 6 Feet Under, the Undertaker's podcast. Mark Calloway. This one has quickly skyrocketed to the top of the pro wrestling podcast ranks. If you go and check like rankings or whatever, Undertaker is a top pod. All of a sudden, just out of nowhere, it's a newer pod, just started this year. And they, definitely are finding their way. They kind of went through a couple different sets and kind of some awkward formatting and YouTube video type things, but they kind of settled on this format with this other guy that he's with. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't suck. But I don't see why people put this as why this is so high ranked. I don't know if people just like Undertaker that much. To me, hot take here, guys. I almost like Undertaker less the more I hear him talk. That's just me. It's just me. Hey, stop. Don't come at me. I'm just saying. I'm not a huge fan of the person who is Mark Calloway. I don't hate the guy. I'm not beefing with him or nothing. I just don't know that I would get along with him. I think we wouldn't. I don't know. And how do I put this? He's got I don't know. I don't know how to put it in the words. I just don't think I would get along with him. He rubs me the wrong way a little bit. He's got this a little bit of a back in my day. It was a little bit better than the way they're doing it now. He's always got this snarky undertone. Like he was recently talking about how Triple H doing such a great job with the current locker room. He really knows how to handle wrestlers these days with their little emotions, and he knows how to talk to them without hurting their little feelings. And he I don't know if he said it quite like that, but he's very, back in my day, we drank whiskey and smashed bottles over our head, and we were tough guys, and blah, 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 blah. He's very much that guy, and I just, he's been kind of had some burial things to say about AEW. Just outright disrespect, which is fine. He's a lifelong WWE guy, but hey, there is a greater wrestling industry out there that, I don't know. To me, Undertaker, we'll just put him, I'm going to put him in good hand. I don't even know that I like to listen to that on a regular basis. When I do, it's painful to listen to be honest with you. I try to skim. But that's just me, clearly, because he's a super popular podcast right now. So that might be one you want to come at me in the comments for, bro. I'd love to hear your take on it or argue with you. We'll argue about it. Argue. Impulsive. This is not necessarily a wrestling podcast, but it's a wrestler hosted podcast now. I mean, it wasn't when it started, but Logan Paul, you have to say, he's pretty regular in WWE. He's not just a one-off guy anymore. He's the United States champion. He's wrestled at 2 WrestleManias. You gotta, at this point, he's a wrestler. He's a wrestler. It's a wrestler-hosted podcast. And he has wrestlers on from time to time. And I'm going to actually put this as the first entry into the Top Guys podcast. I don't even know that I listen to this all the time because he's not just wrestling. He, does interviews. He's pop culture, right? He's Logan fucking Paul, for Christ's sakes. So a lot of his interviews I won't listen to because it's just not for me. But when he does the wrestling ones, they're great. They're great shows. They ask interesting questions. I've often talked about how there's like this frat boy approach to it from him and his homie there that looks like X-Pac. And they ask like kind of like, dude, remember that time where you said, what was that like? Like, they're not entirely like that, but they ask questions that, like, say, Chris Van Vliet is not going to ask. So it's a completely different thing. And it's interesting. And Logan's a good host, and he's a good personality, and he gets a lot of heat, and I love it. Impulsive, Top Guys. Keeping it 100 with Conan and Disco. I don't listen to this one very often. It's another one that's just negative more often than not. And, Disco Inferno doesn't always have the best takes on things. Conan actually does. Conan's a very wise guy. I would pick Conan's ear as often as I could. Glenn Gilberti, on the other hand, I don't know. I think he's smarter than people give him credit for, and he does have good takes from time to time. But he also has really bad, stupid takes. So I can't say that this podcast is his drizzling shits. But I don't listen to it very often, and it doesn't have a lot to offer, and that's just me. Like I said, I'm not into the negativity, and I'm not into the weird takes sometimes, but some of you might love this one. I'm going to go ahead and put it in good hand for me, but if you were to say it's mid, or even, I don't think anybody would put it in their top guys, but if you were to put it in mid, I wouldn't argue with you. Stevie Richards' YouTube channel. My God, this fucking guy came out of nowhere. And kind of there was a couple guys that popped up here, him and Maven on the YouTube scene, and Stevie's just been doing great, especially the analysis, the breakdowns of the somebody gets hurt, or if there's a crazy move, or just any shit that happens. And it's a unique presentation too. The analysis on the TV and the slowing it down like John Madden and drawing the circles on it and really breaking it down to that level like a fucking coach reviewing film in the locker room with his football team. It's a new approach. It seems like a simple idea that somebody should have been doing before, but Stevie nails it. I think it's that's a tough one. I don't know if you could say it's a top guy. I don't know if it's that far. God, it's mid almost seems a little harsh. Same with Gorilla Position. I guess that's what that category's for, though. It really separates the men from the boys, right? You're by no means saying it sucks. There's 2 levels below you, but it's not quite that elite tier must watch. But goddamn, they do a lot of good content on there. Break out the barbecue sauce. We got JR's Grillin' JR here. His podcast with old Conrad Thompson. I'm going to throw that in mid. I don't know that it's quite top tier podcast material, but JR's wisdom alone, and then when he gets pissed off and goes on his little rants and shit, it's fun to watch. It's not something that I listen to often. It does kind of drone on after a while and kind of get a little, kind of wears itself out, but then again, JR's got a lot of great takes, a lot of great wisdom and knowledge on shit, and there's a lot of clips I catch myself checking out because I want to get JR's take. It's not a top guy, but it definitely doesn't suck. Grillin' JR. Not Sam Wrestling. I love me some Sam Roberts. I think Sam's a top guy. I'm going to put Sam right in top guy. Sam's good. He's consistent. He's always there. He's been busting out those emergency podcasts just to fucking have an emotional, we're just going to get an emotional reaction to the storylines that were happening during the WrestleMania season. He's been around since forever, man. I mean, I've been a fan of his since he was scrawny and had the curly hair. Now he's gotten a little bit thicker, and he's got the, not fat, by the way. He's been like lifted. He like works out and shit. But he's got the hair all buzzed down. Sam's great. Sam, he's always got good content, great interviews. He also does completely separate from the wrestling, and I know that's not what we're talking about, but he's got Sam Roberts Now or whatever, his live show, and it's fun. Him and Hot Dog are just fun to watch as well. I think Sam is a top tier podcaster. Wrestling Observer. This is mostly Brian Alvarez, Mike Sempervive. They all very often have Dave Meltzer on as well. This is always good for newsworthy. Meltzer gets a little bit rambly, a lot of bit rambly. He talks the same way he writes, which at least he's consistent, right? With no actual periods or anything, just run-on sentences and discombobulated thoughts. But Alvarez is sharp, and he's always got a good take, whether you like it or not. I'm going to throw Wrestling Observer and Top Guys. I check in with them often. I get their news clips. It's good shit. And Alvarez, better than Meltzer. Alvarez is fun to watch. I like it. Swerve City, your AEW World Champion. Swerve Strickland, hosted with his rapper buddy guy there. I think does Sammy Guevara's theme, if I'm not mistaken. This is a mid podcast. I'm not going to put it in the top, but they are working their way up. I think before I had it lower when I did this a couple years ago. But it's better than a good hand. I mean, they just had Will Ospreay on. They got Adam Copeland coming on. Or he was on. No, I think he's coming on the show. Swerve's working his way up, and he's had a lot of good guests, and he's continuing to do it. And I think Swerve's just getting better and better at everything he does. He's honing, he's honing his craft. And the podcast is just an extension of that. It's not a great podcast. It's not a must listen. It's not a throw it in your regular everyday rotation. But it's one that you're going to want to like at least subscribe to and just see who's on the show or what the topic of the show is. Because, there's a good chance that it's something you might want to give a listen to. Inside the Ropes. These guys always have fantastic interviews. They do live event interviews too, where they'll record them in front of a live audience and stuff like that. Like they'll do an event with it. They just always have banger interviews. You can never be let down by Inside the Ropes. Anything that they put out, it's going to be something that you're going to want to check out, especially if you have an interest in the guy that's on it. I wouldn't say they're main eventer, but I'd put them in the top guys. I would say there's a pretty good chance that if they put a video out, it's something that you're going to want to watch. The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy's podcast. This is with John Alba. John Alba is a fantastic host. Unfortunately, one of my favorite podcasts, Strictly Business, has come to an end. That was with Alba and Bischoff. But Alba's still around, and he's doing the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy with Matt Hardy, obviously. Obviously. Matt is well-spoken. He's smart. He knows his shit. But this can be boring from time to time. It depends what they're doing. They usually cover a topic, the old Conrad Thompson format and stuff. But I would say Matt has good takes, and for that, it's definitely worth a listen. More times than not, I would say. I wouldn't put it any higher than mid, though. I wouldn't say it's in that top upper echelon of podcast listening, but Matt Hardy's podcast is definitely a good listen. I don't know about you guys, but Dirty Dutch Mantel, story time with Dutch Mantel, one of my favorite to watch. I think James, as a YouTuber, as a host, phenomenal. I almost put his wrestling shoot interviews up here, like his channel by itself, because he does other great interviews with other people. But Dutch Mantel, man, I tell you, I watch nearly every clip that they put out, or I don't know that I watch like the full episode always, but definitely the clips and stuff like that. I think Dutch is wise. I was gonna say wise beyond his ears, but he's an old man. His mustache shows it, the wiseness. I would just sit under his learning tree all day long. I would want him on any booking team that I'm putting together. I just love me some Dutch Mantel. I put him in my top guys. I don't know that he's a main eventer. I don't know that he's the elite of the elite, but he's a top guy in my book. Can you dig it, sucker? Booker T's podcast, The Hall of Fame, with Booker T and Brad Gilmore. I'm going to go ahead and throw this one in mid. This one's just okay. Booker T often has bad takes that are outright disagreeable. Like, they're not even like, oh, well, I mean, that's his opinion, this is mine. Like, oh, you're just way off on this one. He's also one of those personalities that kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. I don't know why. Don't ask me. I just think, his personality is just It's just for me. And that mixed with his bad takes. But every once in a while, they got some good shit. I also think Brad Gilmore, as good as he is, kind of comes off as like a smug douche from time to time. That's just me. Hey, these are just my opinions. I'm just telling you how I feel. You might think I'm a smug douche. I don't care. But the show, for all of those criticisms, they definitely have some good takes from time to time, so I wouldn't put them any lower than mid. Busted Open. This is a main event podcast for me. Hosted by Bully Ray, Tommy Dreamer, Dave LaGreca, of course, the man. Mickey James is in the mix. Dolph Ziggler works there now. Mark Henry. Definitely wrestler hosted, wrestling centric. They always have great interviews on there. They always have great insights, great perspectives, good advice, good recaps. Like, they're daily, they're consistent with everything. Man, and they've been going for so many years now. They've had so many top stars on the show. They even shot an angle with The Rock this year. That tells you how big they are. Busted Open. Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. Man, this is the OG, right? This is the one that started them all. You could say Colt Cabana's podcast. You could say Stone Cold's podcast or Jericho's. All of them were out before Something to Wrestle. But Something to Wrestle kind of reinvented the format a little bit and paved the way for a lot of other wrestlers to be able to do a lot of different things. But since Bruce has been working back with the WWE, he is either there or he's not. It's completely shoddy, hit or miss. But still, when they dive into topics, when Bruce is locked in, he's still locked in. He's still great. He's still got that Bruce Pritchard persona. But along with that, he doesn't answer a lot of questions. He's very defensive. He's very pro WWE. I'm going to throw this one in mid or top guy. I'm going to say this one would have dropped down to mid. This would have been a top guy at one point in time. I got a cat hair on my microphone. You can't see. It doesn't matter. Something to Wrestle would have been higher on the list. It certainly earned the credentials to be, but I would just say after a while hearing Bruce talk about fucking Backlash 2000 fucking whatever, it just who cares after a while. And Bruce he kind of says the same shit over and over after a while, and now the inconsistency with him being in WWE. But it's still one of, when it's, like I said, when it's on, it's on. When it's on point, it's on point. It's just slipping. It's slipping down a little bit. I think you guys would agree with that. Fightful's YouTube channel, their podcast, they've been getting great interviews. They do great review coverage, good news segments. I say Fightful's definitely, they're right up there in top guys for me. I think they're worth a regular listen. They're worth a subscribe to follow just to see what they're talking about, who's on, that sort of thing. Sean Ross Sapp, he's a smart guy. He's got great opinions. He's well connected, and a whole slew of other co-hosts, and that depends what kind of show you like, who's doing the review for that. But Fightful's, man, their coverage is on point. Their news that they report is rarely ever wrong or misleading. It's just good shit. I listen to them regularly. Maven. is out on the scene with not a podcast, but a YouTube channel, and a jolly good YouTube channel it is, by the way. We'll put this in top guys, at least for now. I think the format that they're doing in YouTube, I've already starting to see they're kind of doing the same video, just reworded a little bit. You know, the way that they pick their topics it's got a shelf life. I think they can only do the 2 years from now. I don't know that they're still going to be able to still bust out the unique video subjects like they're doing now. But Maven quickly rose up to prominence with this, like it was pretty critically reviewed. Everybody seems to pretty well like what he's doing on YouTube, how he's talking about behind the scenes stuff, how he's breaking things down from his personal perspective. And Maven's got a great personality. Maven should still be on TV right now. I know he actually just did a surprise. Was it a surprise? Maybe it was advertised appearance for Booker T's Indie Fed, but it was I think he could play a general manager role really, really well. Like, for example, with Tony Khan being out and the Young Bucks are taking over, that whole storyline, you could do a thing where, it leads to a blood and guts where the EVPs lose their power and Tony Khan installs a general manager to run things from there, and could be Maven. I don't know. It's just one of many pitches you could do. But a manager, a general manager, something. He should still be on TV because he's got a great personality. The MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani. I think this is a main event, must listen. Only if, I guess if you're an MMA fan, it is too. But for me, as a wrestling fan, anytime there's a wrestler on, I'm listening. I'm not that huge into MMA where I really want to listen to, unless it's a big star or something. I don't really care to listen to all of those or him talk about, what's going on in MMA. If he's talking about wrestling or interviewing somebody in wrestling, it's a must listen. Ariel's a great interviewer. He's one of the best interviewers of our time. He asks those questions. I was talking about my man Chris Van Vliet asks like the Hollywood style questions, very safe questions, if you will, surface level questions. Ariel's the opposite. Ariel will dig. That's why we got that CM Punk thing. You knew going into that. He and Punk knew damn well going into that Ariel was going to ask tough questions. Ariel does. He doesn't dig for dirt necessarily. He's not trying to be drama. But as an interviewer, there are questions that we as a listening audience have that we want to know, and he's going to be the guy that'll ask that question every single time. It's great. Talk is Jericho, baby. This is another one that's been slipping for me. I'll put it in mid. I think I might have had this as like a main event or, certainly the top, towards the top before. But I think, Jericho, one of the things, he doesn't do video. I think he does actually do video, but for some reason it's not on anywhere. Is it just like a Patreon? Does he do a Patreon gimmick or what? I don't know what his deal is, but record the whole interview, put it up. I mean, nowadays, in today's world, you have to be on YouTube. You have to be in a video format. Sounds like Cornette. The way Cornette does it is unique to him, and that's fine. But Jericho needs to be out there doing that, and his guests have been a little wonky too. I find myself more and more, I'll still check in, but like more and more I just don't care. I don't know if it's because he's doing more rock and roll stuff, or I just don't know. I don't know what it is, but I'm not one of those people that don't like Jericho or that I'm falling out of love with Jericho or never liked Jericho like a lot of people. Like, I'm a Jericho fan and I'm a fan of his pod. I'm just saying the pod is not where it used to be. 83 weeks with Eric Bischoff and Conrad Thompson. I'm going to put this as a main event. Now, I'll put that up there with the caveat that Eric Bischoff is annoying as fuck sometimes. And so for the Pro Wrestling Podcast, I sample clips from a show, to get that news point. Bischoff's are consistently the worst clips because he rambles. And not necessarily rambling like he doesn't know what he's talking about. He just long story short is not a concept known to Eric Bischoff, so he's not a big soundbite speaker, if you know what I'm saying. But nonetheless, he's funny, he's confrontational, he's controversial, he's got wise opinions. Conrad's always keeping him in check, which is also good and entertaining to watch. And they cover current events. They've gotten out of this format where they're covering, and they will, like on a slow news week or whatever the fuck, they'll cover a topic and they'll go in depth, and they do that plenty. They also spend considerable amounts of time talking about current events, something to Wrestle doesn't do, for example. Click this, the Kevin Nash podcast with him and Sean Oliver. This is a tough one because so Sean Oliver I like a lot. Back since I first discovered like the wrestling shoot interviews, the U-shoots and stuff like that he was doing. Sean Oliver's the man, right? Like he's got a fun personality. Kevin Nash, him and Oliver together have a good rapport. They play well off of each other. They're a good pairing for this type of thing. You know, they play off each other well. But Kevin Nash, my God, like negative a lot of times, dickish always. And then the politics. I just cannot, I do not tune into wrestling to listen to politics. If I want my fix on the news or the politics or current events, I am certainly not going to get it from Kevin Nash. If I want to listen to pundits talk about the news and break it down for me and give me educated opinions, I'm not going to Kevin Nash for it. He half-ass watches 1-2 channels of an extremely biased position and then just talks like he's in the know, which is fine. That's what most people do, and he's entitled to do that. The average person has these same exact conversations. Problem is, I don't want to sit and listen to it for 2 hours. When he talks about good shit, he's got things that hit, though. You know what I mean? Like, he makes good points, too. Kev's a smart guy. He's been around the business. He's wise. He's a veteran. They got good banter back and forth. They get into really good stories from time to time. But Nash is also equally painful to get through sometimes. I'm going to put this in mid. I think it could be a top guy if he dropped some of the politics stuff. And I think it could be. And look, if you are a particular fan of his exact brand of politics, then you might prefer him more than I do. But, I think he has the potential to break higher than that, and I certainly wouldn't put him lower than that. It's a mid show. And finally, we got Cornette's Experience and Drive-Thru. I'm going to group these together. They are two separate shows, but they are essentially the same thing. Oh, Brian hosts one and Corny hosts one, and sometimes they cover review matches and stuff, and other times they talk about current events. Doesn't matter. For my all intents and purposes, when you pull up a clip of Cornette, you're not really looking to see what show it came from, right? It's all the same. So for all intents, and look, either way, they're both going to end up in the same spot for me anyway. These are main event pods. Main event pods. There's nobody better than Cornette out there doing it. Now, you can disagree with Cornette. A lot of people do, and that's fine. You can hate Cornette even. That's fine. But you can't argue that his shows aren't highly entertaining and some of, if not the highest viewed, ranked podcast in wrestling. Cornette's that personality, that character that you have to get his take. You have to hit play when a topic comes up that he's going to want to cover, and you're just waiting for it to pop up, and you want to hear what he has to say. I can't imagine what it would be like from the other side of just pure hatred for Cornette, where everything you hear from him makes you cringe and you hate it all. That would be weird, because I just think Cornette is so fucking smart to the business. You could disagree with things if you like, but I think his experience, his knowledge, more often than not, his take is rock solid. That, albeit a little dated, I don't think that you're ever going to convince anybody that wrestling's not real anymore. And thus, you know, some of the spectacle that he criticizes, I think, is needed in wrestling. That's what separates it from pretend UFC. It makes it a spectacle, you know, the show, the pomp, the circumstance, presentation, the high spots, the crazy angles, that kind of stuff. It's what makes wrestling now in today's world, separate from UFC. Because before UFC, wrestling was pretending to be UFC, you know what I mean? Like, it was trying to pass itself off as legitimate fights, or not even when it was kind of known that wrestling wasn't real anymore per se. It was still like the only thing filling that combat niche, so to speak. But once UFC came in, WWE had to kind of evolve into a more entertainment-y type of product. That's what I'm saying. So that's where I'm going to put that. That's where everything lies on my list. What did you guys think? Do you agree with me on a lot of these? Do you disagree with me on a lot of these? I would love to know your thoughts. How would you have, maybe not where you'd place every single one of these, but where did I go wrong? Where would you switch things around? This is fun. This is why I do this, to interact with you guys and to kick out a little bonus content for you to enjoy. That's all I got for you. If you liked what I put out for you here, please hit that subscribe button down below. Like, comment, all that shit. It helps the algorithm, helps me get out more, helps me grow as a channel, as a podcaster, as a human being, man. I'm trying to grow as a human being. Hit the subscribe. Peace, love, and pizza. I am your boy, Seth Grimes, and we'll catch you in the next video.